Okay, today the topic is universality in a divided world. So I want to speak a little bit about some interesting concepts we get into here today. And my friends, as always, feel free to chime in at any time, thoughts, questions, ideas, anything you'd like. Do not hesitate. Hit us up in the chat. And who knows, maybe if you're lucky, you'll even get to unmute yourself. All right, so the topic begins with, okay, here we go. Let's start off with a piece from Pirkei Avot, which is very cryptic. And I'm going to ask you guys to think about this a little bit because I'm going to look to you for a question. Okay? Hey, thanks. So, right back at you. So here we go. The Pirkei Avot chapter, Ethics of the Fathers, chapter 5, teaching 1, Mishnah Aleph, says, Be'asara ma'amarot, Be'asara ma'amarot nivra olam, that the world was created with 10 sayings. 10 sayings of God. So for example, if you're familiar with the creation story, God said, let there be light, and there was light. That's a saying, right? So there are 10 of those. There are 10 sayings of Hashem, 10 sayings of God, that God creates the world with. And so Pirkei Avot goes on to say, Umato midlamar. What's that coming to teach us? The fact that it was 10. Couldn't Hashem have created, couldn't God have created the world with 10 sayings, with one saying? So like the question is, why 10 and not 1? Or why 10 really and not any other number? And so the answer that's given is like this. Pay close attention. The answer is Elalihi pareya mina reshaim sheme'abdim et ha'olam shenivra ba'asar ma'amarot. But the answer is that it was for the purpose of taking retribution from the wicked who destroy the world that was created with 10 sayings. And it was, and to give goodly reward to the righteous that sustain the world that was created with 10 sayings. So my friends, the question for you is, what are the questions on everything I just said? Go ahead. Anybody? I see Yona typing away over there. Hopefully he's going to type something to us and not something on some other social media outlet. Anyone, any thoughts on that? All right, I have no thoughts so far, but I do see Shona typing. There we go. There we go. Yona hit the main number one question right on the head there. Okay, and let me explain that question. If you recall a second ago, we said that the rabbis have taught that the world was created with 10 sayings, and they ask why 10 and not 1. And then the answer has something to do with righteousness or wickedness or tzaddikim, rishaim. What's the connection? 10 versus 1, and the answer has something to do with righteous, a goodly reward and the smackdown, getting the smackdown if you do the wrong thing, right? Whoo! So there is something to do with that, but we're not going to go there right now because it does. Because that's not. You want to say the parade? Okay, said that. Maybe we can talk about that. Interesting. I'm going to give you though the approach of the Maharal because Yona asked a very good question. By the way, let me point out another thing that I haven't seen anywhere else, but I picked up on myself, which is there's a very strange thing here in this Mishnah, in case you didn't notice. A lot of times when we talk about righteous and wicked, we talk in the order that I just said, right? There you go, righteous, wicked, positive, negative, right? How often do we find ourselves saying negative, positive, or wicked, then righteous, right? You barely ever find it. I don't know, there might be another source or two that have it, but barely ever do you find such a thing. Yet here, that right, we'll say good and evil. You don't say evil and good, usually, right? So Ray, very good. We're going to get there, God willing. Maybe we'll see if we get there. See, everyone wants to go there. We'll see. But so yeah, so that's an added question is, hold on a second. Why do we mention here the negative before the positive? We barely ever do that. So hold on, strap on, my friends. Strap in your safety belts. We're going to take you a little bit into the world of the Maharal of Prague to explain this and bring out hopefully some great lessons of life and lessons of the world in this manner, okay? So here it goes. Okay? classic idea in Kabbalah is that God looked into the Torah and created the world, right? It says in the Midrash, it says in the Zohar, God looked into the world, God looked into the Torah and created the world. Famously, we say in English that that the Torah is the quote unquote blueprint of creation. Now, what this means though is that the Torah has everything in it. The Torah, that all of creation that all of creation is one, right? If it all comes from the same blueprint, then we're all one. We're all at our core, this one, rooted at the same place. And that means then the way we can look at the world, the details of this world, the individuality that we see in this world, the separation between things, is that really at its core, it's all one. So it's kind of like looking at a light through a prism, right? If you look at the bottom of the whole thing, you find a bunch of different colored lights in a bunch of different shapes, and then, but at the core of it all, you have that one unfiltered, pure light. And so that's what we're saying really is all of creation. Just like you have you have one Torah, and you have the parchment, and then you have a bunch of letters written on the parchment. Similarly, there's a unity in all of those letters in the fact that they're all united on one parchment, right? And so just like all of creation is tied together, so all the more so that all of humanity is tied together. Matter of fact, according to Kabbalah, we are all aspects of that original, holistic, universal, one soul of Adam. And that's a whole separate conversation. We actually spoke about it a few weeks ago, the concept of reincarnation, about how really we're all rooted in the one holistic, universal soul of Adam. But the point is, though, that we are all here to be, like was said by Adam, partners in we were created in the image of God, right? Which means to say, one understanding of that is that we're to be partners of creation in this whole story of history. And so what that teaches us also is there's certain laws that have to do with this. For example, in Judaism, there's a teaching that we're not supposed to take revenge, right? Why aren't we supposed to take revenge? So first you might think that is a moral teaching, and it is. But really, if you look a little bit deeper, it's a deeper teaching about who we are and what we are. So how so? Because if you, right, what is the classic example of revenge in Judaism? Very simple. Someone, you go over to your friend and you say that you want to borrow a hammer. And the friend says, no, they're not going to lend you their hammer. The next day, the friend comes to you and says to you, excuse me, can I borrow your screwdriver? And you say, well, I would give you the screwdriver, but hey, yesterday you didn't give me your hammer. So take a hike, buddy. I'm not giving you my screwdriver. So if you're only not doing the favor to the guy because yesterday he rejected doing the favor for you for whatever reason, so then that we call revenge. Now, why is that not allowed in Judaism? So again, you might think this is some moral teaching, and that might be true on the surface level. But on a deeper level, can you hear the idea that revenge is the denial of what we're saying over here? If we're saying over here that we're really all one at the core, so then think about it. Think about it in terms of yourself. If your hand slapped your face, would you then slap your hand? Probably not, right? But when we go ahead and act with revenge, despite all this, we deny the essential teaching that we're actually all one at the core, right? Now, this is the significance, says the Maharal of Prague, of the number 10. That up until number 9, everything is scattered and individual, right? Let me explain what I mean. Got the little whiteboard here today. I came very prepared for you guys today. Hold on a second. Let's see if we can get it going. Bring it down here. Let's see what I can do here. It's going to be tough. Okay. So I don't know if you guys remember this. When I was a kid back in school, long time ago, we had something in the first grade, second grade. There was like these workbooks, and they would try to teach you about the one in math. They try to teach you about the ones column and the tens column. Okay, so the ones were like these little squares. Okay, these little boxes. And then you'd have this like thing like this over here, which was supposed to be a bunch of boxes stuck together in one unit. And that was going to be 10 boxes. I didn't put all 10 here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. You get the point. Let's say this is 10. That's how it was in the workbook. You had 10 over here. Then a bunch of ones. So it's to teach you about like the ones column and the tens column and the hundreds column. You know, 100 was a big box, right? And so what does this teach you? This teaches you that in our system, we understand that there's a certain level that up until number 9, everything is separate and individual. The concept of 10 is that it's a summation it's a concept of a certain level of a unity, that it's an entity at number 10, right? We see it in how we do math as well, like I just explained. Now the truth is, so this is the idea of the number 10, according to the Maharal as well. The Maharal is trying to teach you that 10 is the concept of multiplicity that is unified. And let me explain what I mean. Before we explain what that means, let me also share with you, the Maharal explains as well, that if up until number 9, everything is scattered individual. Also by the number 1 as well, you find that if the world would have been created with one saying of God, so then it would be like creation would be unified. Everything in creation, all aspects of creation would be unified in how they were created, but not necessarily unified after that. So for example, if you took a hammer and you hit a rock and sparks fly, so all of those sparks were created in unison, right? They were created as one. But what happens to spark over here, right? If let's say some water falls on this spark, does it affect this other spark that popped out that is over here? No, it doesn't. So they're created as one, their creation happens as one, but afterwards what happens to this piece has no effect and bearing to what happens to this piece, right? And so the idea is what God is putting into the universe, what God is putting into creation by creating the world with 10 sayings of God, specifically with 10 sayings, is that he's creating a world that, yes, there's more than one, but the idea of 10 is that it's still unified. It's a multiplicity that is unified. It's a unified multiplicity, that what happens to one piece over here does affect another piece over there, right? So as opposed to the hammer hitting the rock and then the sparks flying, there's the unity, the creation, they're all unified in how they were created, but then what happens afterwards into this fragment, to this piece of creation has no effect what happens over here. Not the case with what we're sharing right now. The idea of the concept of the number 10 is that it's more than one, but comes together as one, right? And that's the idea also of the letter Yud, numerically valuing 10, yet it's the smallest point. So it's oneness, but it's multiplicity. So it's a multiplicity that works as one entity, as oneness. Do you hear that idea? So now if we take this understanding, we can plug it back into, if we take this understanding, we plug it back into that original source of Pirkei Avot, of Ethics of the Fathers that I shared with you, and we come out with a grand understanding of the world, right? So just hang with me here for a second, and it'll become very clear, right? Remember, we said before, Ba'asara Ma'amarot Nivra Olam, that it says that the world was created with 10 sayings of God. But right now, we already said that the concept of 10 really means unified multiplicity, okay? So every time it says 10, I'm going to put in, instead of the word 10, I'm going to say it over, but with the words unified multiplicity, right? So here it goes. The world was created in a way of unified multiplicity. But why? Why was it created in this way? Why was it created as 10 and not 1, in a manner of unified multiplicity? Why? Because by creating it in a way of unified multiplicity, it increases the retribution of the wicked who destroy the world that was created in a state of unified multiplicity, but it increases the goodly reward for the righteous who sustain the world that was created in a state of unified multiplicity. Now, if you're totally lost with all these words, let me try to explain it very, very, very clearly for you 1 second, right? Let's make a little diagram here. You're going to see my wonderful art skills. Here goes. Okay. So for example, imagine we had a building. I'm gonna draw a building right here for y'all. Uh-oh, 1 second. Okay, won't end up drawing on the wall. Okay, let me lower it down again. Here we go. Okay. So imagine here we have a building. Okay. We got here the foundations of the building. I don't know if you can see that. If you can't, I'm going to fix it in a second. Hold on. Look at that sick depth perception I put in there. Not exactly, but all right. Here we go. Oh, good. You can see it, I think. Okay, let's give you a close-up look here. Look close-up view of my building. Here's my building. Here we go. Okay, here we go. Good. So here, recognize that we have here a building that has 4 foundations. Now, if I were to ask your average Joe out in the street who's not in the middle of some philosophical class as we are in right now, if I were to ask your average Joe on the street, just gut response and ask him, here there's a building with 4 foundations. I show him this building. I tell him there's a building with 4 foundations. How much of the building does each foundation hold up? How much is it responsible for holding up? How much credit should each foundation get for holding it up? So, what's the gut response of that guy? You could put it all in. You could put it into the chat there. What's he going to probably say? Each foundation holds up blank percentage of the building. You tell me. Thank you very much, Yona. Most people are going to respond, gut response, that each shows up with 20. Each one is responsible and succeeds in keeping 25% of that building up, 1/4. However, what happens if one of the foundations of the building is not strong enough to do its responsibility, is not strong enough to fulfill what it needs to fulfill? So what happens then to this building, my friends? Well, the other ones have to take the load. Well, then what happens? What happens? Because remember, each one is built in a way that each one can essentially support 25%. So what happens if one of them is just boop, eliminated? What happens to this building? Collapses. There you go. So hold on a second, though. I thought it was only holding up 25%. No, but when you remove it, you see that without its doing its 25%, 100% of the building comes down. So what does that mean? That means when we see the negative effect of what happens when a person doesn't do what they're supposed to, when the foundation doesn't do what it's supposed to do, so now we see that really this foundation, to a certain extent, deserves 100% of the credit for holding up the building, because if it were not to do what it's supposed to do, 100% of that building is coming down. And so this is what Hashem does for our world. Hashem sets up our world in a way, God, you have to understand, God is an idealist, right? Hashem sets up the world in a way that each one of us, yes, we have our own responsibilities of what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to hold up whatever it is that we need to hold up. But if we don't, when we go ahead and if we are not strong enough to do the thing that we're supposed to do, if we're in the wrong place, whatever, we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, so then we don't only just affect ourselves, but we also are, again, interrelated, we're interconnected with everything else and everyone else, because again, there's a unified multiplicity in this world. The world is created in a state of universality, which means that what I do in my little corner has an effect on the rest of the world, right? And so why, at first we asked the question, why would God do that, right? Isn't that dangerous, right? And by the way, let's just be clear what we're saying here, right? It's very much like that story of the guy in the boat, right? We'll talk about that actually in a second. Why would God do this? Let me ask you that question. Why would God set it up in a way where, if I could to a certain extent, right? Let me give you the story of the boat story, right? The classic story. The people on the ship, and And what happens with them? They hear some drilling, and drilling. They run downstairs and they barge into this guy's room, and they see him drilling down to the bottom of the ship, right? So they're drilling down to the bottom of the ship, and so obviously they have a problem with this, right? So they say to the guy, "Listen, what are you crazy? What are you doing over here? You got to stop this." And the guy says, "Dude, live and let live, man. Peace. I'll do my thing over here. I'm in my room. You go your room over there. You do what you want over there. I'm going to stay in my little area right over here and live and let live, man." But we see that live and let live doesn't really work when you're on a boat together, right? And this is the interesting thing about the universal nature of the world, of the united nature of the world. It's so funny that same people a lot of times talk about how everything's one and united nature and universality and all this stuff. Don't really go to the proper implications of that, which is that, like, okay, if it's all united, then what you do is affecting me, and what I'm doing is affecting you, and it makes a difference, right? And so the question is, okay, so hold on a second, why would God do this? And the answer is very simple: because God is an idealist, and he sets up the situation in which, like, he opens the door for us to maximize our time here, even though it's risky, right? He opens up the door for us to maximize our time. Because look, remember, all you got to do is, if you're this foundation right over here, if you're this piece of this building, you just do your 25%, your avoda, your thing that you're supposed to do, and you get credit, exponential credit, because we see what happens if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. The entire world comes down. So when you do your 25%, you get a reward of 100%. Sick deal. Why? Because we see what would happen if you weren't doing what you're supposed to be doing. And this is, by the way, the teaching in Mishlei and Proverbs. It says, Tzaddik Yesod Olam, that the tzaddik, the righteous person, is a foundation of the world. That the world is, the righteous person is holding up the world. What? By doing his or her part, right? Okay, so this is the story of the universal nature of the world. So that having been said, we can also move to the next conversation, which is that, like, okay, if that's the case, by the way, let's just first ask questions on that. Anyone have questions, thoughts, ideas on anything we just said? I hope it wasn't too, like, wordy and deep, esoteric, disconnected from what people can relate to. I don't know. Questions, thoughts, ideas, anyone, before we go on? A hush comes over the crowd. Fine. So that having been said, Chaval, Jonas, you missed it. You'll have to watch the recording. That having been said, so then we can hold on a second, let me catch Mimi over here. So is each holding up 25% or more? Will the building collapse if you don't do your part, or will it take them so? So this is a good question, Mimi. Great question. That's something for God to determine. Now, obviously, 25% was just the example I gave with this building. But the point is that each person does have what to do here in this world and to do their part. And the point is, when you do your part, you are not just holding yourself up, you're holding up everything else that comes along with that. You're holding up everything else in the world to a certain extent. You're increasing the spiritual level in the world. And so the point is that you're not just gaining in terms of, because I'm doing the righteous thing for myself, I'm gaining because of everything else. Now, how does that play out practically? So it's a good question. There definitely is the idea that you have something to do here that no one else can do, or really that no one else is designated to do. There is a Kabbalistic idea, though, sometimes that the tzaddikim can snatch up your thing if you're not doing it. Chaval, for you, if that happens, you're missing out, but there is such an idea. I've seen it in the Holy Jewish books. So make sure to be doing the thing you're supposed to be doing. Obvious conclusion from all of this, if we understand that the world is united at its core, it's one. at its core. The obvious conclusion is that it is essential for shalom in order for the world to function properly. It's essential to have peace in order for the world to function properly. And so this is the idea that shalom, we know, comes from the word shleimut, which means completion, joy, as opposed to, of course, the opposite of that, which is a certain lacking, a certain space, a certain mourning. But one thing I want to share with you about this, interestingly, let's talk a little bit about shalom for a second, right? One idea is that, hold on a second, there was something I wanted to share. Beautiful. So one idea of shalom, and let's understand the power of shalom, especially for the Jewish people. The idea of shalom is, if you break down the world, again, also Maharal explains that shalom, if you look at the root letters, it's shin, lamid, mem. Let's draw that up. Hold on a second. Let's draw it up here on our board. Making use of this thing once we already found it. Let's use it. Okay. Okay. Here's the word shalom. I should have wrote it in reverse. All right, here's the root letters of the word shalom, which really means the concept of shalem, because when things are when we're in a holistic space, that's when everything is peace, everything finds its place. And so, but the Maharal explains that, look, what shalom is all about, shin, is that you have these three legs going upwards, and each one, the two ones on the outside represent the extremes of society, and the one in the middle is the one that necessarily brings the two extremes together. So shin is the concept of unity. And the idea is that when the Jewish people are in a state of unity, so then they come to the lamed. The lamed is the highest of all the letters, that when the Jewish people are in a state of unity, they're at a high level before God. And when the Jewish people are in a high level in a state of unity, and then they're in a high level before God, then you get to the mem sofit, the final mem, which is totally enclosed. It's nothing can penetrate it. It's the what do you call it? It's like the enemies cannot come against the Jewish people. This is the teaching of the Maharal, not my chidush, but yeah, it's a good thing. So this is the idea that also we find that the Midrash says that is there Midrash, or maybe the Maharal also says is that the other side, the forces of the other side, the forces of negativity can only cling to that which is lacking, and so this is why you find certain stories within Jewish history about how they compare certain generations, when certain generations were righteous but lacked a certain level of unity, that they ended up losing in war, right? During, for example, in Shaul's time. But when the Jewish people weren't at a pious state at all during the Achav's time, yet they were unified and they did love each other. So they went to war and they were victorious, right? And so this is what we're talking about over here. Now, the idea is that when there's this reality of unity, then you need shalom, and then from there comes the specific nature of things, right? This is the idea. There's a classic way of looking at certain things Kabbalistically, is that there's an inner unity, and then there's multiplicity, but in the middle there needs to be this place of shalom, where there's a kind of like a bridge or a meeting place of that inner unity and that outer expression of blessing and multiplicity, right? By the way, this is what we do when we get home. This is what we do on Shabbat as well. It's too much to explain right now, but anyway, this is the story of what we are looking at when we talk about the universality of the world, and then also looking at the nature. If we're all united, then to actually go ahead and live out the blessings of that, we need to be in a state of peace and harmony and all of those wonderful good things. Questions, thoughts, ideas anyone else wants to share before we add a another idea or two. Hold on a second. There are parts that have strengthened themselves more than, okay. So holding up 25%. Okay, I think we got to everything here. So I want to share with you one additional idea. Sorry, did someone just chat something up there? Missed it. No, I guess not. Another idea that I want to share with you in addition is that there is a teaching from Pirkei Avot as well at the beginning that says that the world was created, that the world stands on three things, right? On Torah and on Avoda and on Gemilut Chasadim. On Torah, Avoda, Gemilut Chasadim. And so the teaching is like this. Now, shouldn't it really say that these are the three things that humanity stands on as well? But the point is that what the world is here for is for us to make the most of it, is for us to go ahead and to live out what it is that we were put here to live out. And so that means that the human being is that foundation of the world. And and so I want to add. There was a couple other things I wanted to share with you. Right. One thing is that when we understand this, everything that we know about Judaism can get flipped on its head. Meaning, a lot of times we think that there's two types of commandments here, right? That we have the commandments of between man and God, and we have the commandments between man and man, right? Human being and human being. And so people think there's these two types of commandments. However, there's other ways of looking at it, right? So for example, one way you can look at it is that, hold on a second, if God was the one who said for me to be nice to my friend, so then when I'm being nice to my friend with the intent that God said I should be nice to my friend, so that's also a man-God commandment. Even if it shows up as a man-man commandment, I'm still doing something that's between me and Hashem, right? However, also what we're seeing from everything that we just taught right over here, what we're saying is that everything can be seen the other way too, right? Because if I go ahead and do my God-oriented thing, my man-God commandment, but I do it with the intent that, like, hold on a second, everything that I do isn't just for me becoming a righteous individual. It's also when I do good, I don't just build myself up and raise myself up. I'm going ahead and actually raising up all of creation, raising up all of humanity. And so when a person does something in that state, so then even when they go to God, they are involved in a man-God commandment, really they're also involved in a man-man commandment, right? And when we're in that state, so then we're also involved in a space of giving all the time. And when we go ahead and live this way, then we're also coming with this intention of, like, I'm coming with all of humanity. I'm coming with all of the Jewish people as I approach God, as I approach my life, as I live day in and day out. And this is something that we find that the Sfas Emes says as well, that when in another area of Pirkei Avot, it says, if I'm not for myself, and if I'm not for me, who will be for me? And then it says, and when I am for myself, so then what am I? Meaning to say that, yeah, we're supposed to go ahead and do our piece. We're supposed to be that foundation of the world that we can be. But then the next stage is to have in mind and to dedicate it to the klal, to get dedicated to the masses, to get that that it should be coming with the intention and the focus that we are sharing over here. And so there's many teachings that share this idea, but this is the fundamentals. This is the fundamentals of the concept of universality, and how really all of this world is an expression, a multiplicity, a coming through, a flowing forth of multiplicity that is rooted in the universal nature of really kabbalistically the Torah, right? Kabbalistically the Torah. So, my friends, questions, thoughts, ideas. Yonah, that's it? Nothing to say? Speechless. That means it was good, or it's either it's really good or really bad. Those are the options right there. Or in honor of today's course, today's little class, we could say really bad or really good. For those who are on the beginning, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, good. Okay, fine. That's enough. Anyway, any thoughts or questions or anything anyone wants to share? Tov, beseder. Okay, fine. So we'll call it a little early. My friends, I hope this is meaningful. I hope this is helpful. Hopefully it gives you something to contemplate. There's a lot more to say on this topic. But for now, have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful evening. So some things are beyond the scope of this class, Yona. I'll talk another time. Have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful evening. Thank you so much for being here, guys.